everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thanks for joining me. America entered the 4th of July weekend with coronavirus cases surging and a reckoning over race unsettled. President Trump used the occasion to accuse social justice protesters of trying to destroy America while saying little about the people lost to COVID-19. On Friday and again on Saturday, he painted what some critics are calling a dark picture of extremists attacking historical figures. Meanwhile, in Baltimore, protesters toppled a statue of Christopher Columbus Saturday night and threw it into the harbor. Most protests, however, were peaceful, like this one in Chicago. Marchers there demanded that the city's first permanent settler, a black man whose name you probably don't know, and I confess that I didn't, Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable, be honored with a monument and a holiday. Meanwhile, the president emphasized efforts to defeat what he claims to be the radical left. He downplayed the coronavirus pandemic, despite most parts of the country reporting more cases by the day. As Mark Strassmann reports, several states have seen their largest daily number of cases within the past week.
Washington, D.C.'s celebration of the 4th last night masked a feeling far from festive. On the National Mall, police and protesters were in no mood to party. D.C.'s mayor had urged people to stay safe and stay home. And at the White House, masks were available, but few people wore them, as President Trump bragged about his administration's response to the pandemic.
We have tested almost 40 million people. By so doing, we show cases, 99% of which are totally harmless.
Tell that to health officials across the country. They saw a parade of non-social distancers this weekend. Like this pool party in Michigan and another in Missouri's Lake of the Ozarks area. A rolling wave of COVID already has hit America's Sun Belt. States with the biggest spike over the last week: Georgia, Louisiana, Nevada, Arizona, South Carolina, and Florida. This holiday weekend, South Florida beaches are closed. On Saturday, the state posted 2 alarming COVID records: almost 11,500 new cases in a single day, and its testing positivity rate hit almost 18%. Roughly 1 in 5 newly sick Americans is a Floridian. Governor Ron DeSantis.
I don't think anyone predicted a Sunbelt resurgence in mid-June.
Not exactly true. Many health experts predicted spikes in states that aggressively stayed open for business, like Florida, like Texas. This state's averaging 6,500 new cases a day, 3 times its April average. A mask mandate now covers most of the state. In California, some beaches were closed, others crowded. The virus has burst again in California, the first state to shut down back in March. Roughly 6,300 new cases a day.
Avoid crowds and avoid going to large parades outside of your household.
But for these tailgaters in Folsom, California, COVID fatigue mixed with patriotic pride. The cars were parked 6 feet apart. In Arizona, free COVID testing drew hundreds of people. A sign of the worry here, some cars waited 8 hours before organizers ran out of supplies. Balancing vital signs and dollar signs remains tricky. Expect fuller flights on American Airlines. It's selling middle seats again. And Major League Baseball's abbreviated season is less than 3 weeks away. But America's national pastime already has America's virus. At least 38 players and staff have tested positive.
The president took in a round of golf in Virginia Sunday, and he was greeted by protesters holding signs that criticized his 4th of July address. One read, "Creepy speech." And for more on the latest coming out of the White House, Nikole Killion joins us. Hi, Nikole. The president's Independence Day speeches have received a fair amount of backlash. Can you break down the criticisms for us and how the president has responded?
Yeah, well, I think really in terms of the criticism, as usual with a lot of the president's comments, a lot of this is falling on party lines. Certainly, you have a lot of Democrats who feel that the president is stoking cultural and racial divisions with some of the language that he's used in his speeches over the weekend at a time really where they say the president should be uniting the country. On the flip side, you have many supporters, Republican members of Congress who weighed in today who feel that the president did, in fact, strike the right tone, that he simply understandably trying to celebrate America's accomplishments and achievements. That being said, certainly we did hear the president last night on the South Lawn, take a pointed aim at, what he says is the radical left and anarchist and Marxists who are trying to deface and take down some of these historical statues. He also took quite a pointed jab at the media as well, accusing the media of slandering him and slandering what he says are these heroes. So certainly, you have to take what the president says, through a lens here. But again, I think a lot of the criticism you're hearing certainly coming from, both sides of the aisle, certainly, but certainly when it comes to his tone and rhetoric, this is part of a continuum, more or less, that we've seen from this president in a range of addresses that he's given over time.
Yeah. Nikole, it seems like these speeches are custom tailored to a specific sliver of his base. I'm wondering, even as Republicans continue to stick up and praise his speeches, is there behind the scenes concern within his campaign that he's not reaching out to perhaps a broader audience?
Well, certainly, as we have heard over the weekend, for the most part, a lot of his quotes coming from his speeches have been retweeted by his campaign, and certainly I would say that his supporters and those that are part of his base do feel, again, that the president is striking the right tone here. And again, when some members of Congress were questioned even today on some of the Sunday shows, more or less they seem to feel that the president was providing the right tone here, but also, giving that nuance of we have to put some of this into context, and in terms of looking at the history of this country, certainly the need to embrace both the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that is one message, more or less, that we heard, for instance, from Iowa Congresswoman Joni Ernst, who spoke on one of the Sunday shows, who said it's important to have a national conversation around this and realize the blemishes on U.S. history. We heard similar language, too, from Houston's mayor earlier today, as well, on Face the Nation, who more or less said, when it comes to this debate over statues, certainly this is something that his city has not taken lightly, that they have tried to do it in a very peaceful manner. And again, putting some of these statues in museums, and also just realizing that there is a way to do this. There is a way to kind of provide historical context here, and to do it in a way that, I guess that the public, more or less, can have a better understanding of some of these issues.
Yeah, not as surprising coming from Houston's mayor, but from Senator Joni Ernst, who has stood in lockstep with President Trump and is now facing a tough re-election battle. Very interesting to hear her departure from the president on that, Nikole. Well,
I
also
don't know
want
if
to
I
talk
would
about something that
characterize it as a departure, but more or less, that was just a point that she made, that, certainly the president, she's more or less supported what he said, but she did acknowledge that, you do kind of have to put this in context.
But have we been hearing that from the president in these speeches, that acceptance that there needs to be an understanding that part of America's history has been, as you said, ugly?
Yeah, and I think, certainly the president does recognize that. Certainly he does have a very strong viewpoint, though, on this issue. And it's very clear, in spite of all that has been happening in our country, he firmly believes that, we need to get back to this point of what he calls law and order, that it is important not to deface these monuments. Even some of them, we're talking about people like Christopher Columbus or George Washington, and while yes, some of these people, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, may have owned slaves in the past, and that is fueling some of the criticism behind some of these statues. On the flip side, the president argues these are still American heroes that need to be revered. And look, this is part of an ongoing debate we're having within our society right now. So certainly everyone, including the president, I think is going to come down on it in a different way. I think what's important to point out is just the importance of having a conversation about it. And again, again, you have many Democrats out there who feel like this is a time maybe that the president should be the leading voice here in terms of bringing the country together, even if we have these differences. But they certainly feel that the president, by raising this debate, continues to divide the public.
Well, there's something else that the president said in one of his recent speeches that I want to ask you about, Nikole. He claimed Saturday night that 99% of coronavirus cases are, in his words, totally harmless. We know that that's not true. We've heard that from the White House coronavirus task force, as well as doctors and hospitals out in the field. So has the White House given an explanation for that claim from the president?
So we certainly have tried to press for more information as to what the president may have been referencing with that data point, where they're getting that data from. What I can tell you is that the head of the Food and Drug Administration, Stephen Hahn, was pressed on those numbers earlier today, and he said that, more or less he could not say if those numbers are right or wrong, but acknowledged that this is a serious situation and that the public should take this seriously. Obviously, Dr. Hahn, a member of the president's coronavirus task force as well, but he really tried to tap dance around the issue in terms of not necessarily giving any data to try to back up where the president might have been getting this claim from, and acknowledging that this continues to be a very rapidly evolving pandemic, and again, saying that America should take this seriously.
All right, Nikole Killion, thanks for spending this holiday weekend with us.
You bet.